This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Southampton Select Board for Thursday, July 20th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And if we could all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Thank you. All right, so tonight we have kind of a special meeting, an additional meeting to our regular schedule. We have, I think there's nobody here for open time for the public. I think we're going to jump right into the agenda for tonight, which is to talk about dispatch and communications in particular. And we have some guests here from Northampton and Easthampton, I gather, and along with our interim fire chief and our current police chief and our fire chief, I think, from Easthampton as well. Hi. All right, perfect. So, Ian, I think I'll turn it over to you to sort of give us a foundation for kind of what the discussion is going to be about tonight and kind of how we got here.
Ian Ellingsworth, I'm the police chief in Southampton. Just to, at first, thank you for having this meeting. I requested this meeting and some actions taken based on some staffing issues at the Southampton Dispatch Center. And I also want to thank our neighbors, the Northampton Dispatch Center, as well as the Easthampton Police Department, for coming forward and trying to help us and throw a safety net out to us to help us get through this process. Currently, right now, the Southampton, part of the Southampton and Fire and EMS, the police and fire and EMS, we have a component, it's the dispatch center. That dispatch center handles all 911 calls, as well as some administrative duties as well, but they also dispatch the police and fire and EMS services. To be an emergency 911 dispatcher, you have to have training that is regulated by the state 911 department. To receive a 911 call. That's required to receive a 911 call, to actually answer a 911 call. All of our dispatchers are certified in that. However, we have lost one full-time dispatcher. We currently have 4 full-time dispatchers, and we have about, I want to say, 6 part-time dispatchers, and they're all qualified to answer 911 calls. We are currently staffed with, when we're fully staffed, it's 4 full-time dispatchers. And that in and of itself does not cover all the shifts. That's why we augment it with a part-time staff. However, in April, or actually may have been February, a dispatcher, a full-time dispatcher, notified us of her intent to resign, and she went to work for a larger dispatch center. We posted that position in April, and we still don't have any qualified applicants for that position. So we've been down a full-time dispatcher since actually probably around March. We've been down a full-time certified dispatcher. Recently, I've been notified by another dispatcher that of her intent to resign, to also transfer to a larger dispatch center. So that leaves us now 2. And as of early August, we'll be down 2 full-time dispatchers. Considering the not being able to hire dispatchers or having difficulty hiring certified dispatchers creates a conundrum for us. Because again, you have to be in that seat, you have to be certified 911 dispatcher to receive the calls. So I reached out to our neighbors, Northampton and Easthampton, and asked of their interest of regionalization, or at least starting that phase, but primarily helping us out with this current situation. How I see things is this is a 2-stage process, a 2-step process. The first process would be having our 911 calls transferred to a host agency they will answer those calls, and then they can either forward calls to us or forward the information to us, and we have somebody sitting in our dispatch center that then can dispatch. And the reason we have to have this 2-step process is because currently, right now, we cannot leave our dispatch center unstaffed. There's certain components within the dispatch that has to be staffed, and we also want to have a transition towards making it capable of being unstaffed. And as a result of that, we're going to need to have some time for this transition from stage 1 to stage 2. And stage 2 hopefully will be the ultimate transition. I see it is hopefully through a dispatch center that can be recognized as a regional emergency communication center. And the reason why you want to be recognized by that, by the state 911 department, is there's a lot of incentives towards that. Clearly, I operationally, and I've also spoken with our fire chief, we like the idea of keeping it more local, so there's greater continuity, also some familiarity with their services with ours, and that is essentially where we're at right now. At this stage, what I think is important is that we determine what host agency will be able to throw that safety net under us while we move towards this regionalization goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
One part I didn't understand during the phase 1, you said that you have the host agency which would answer the call.
Sure.
And then contact us in Southampton. Does the person that they contact in Southampton have to be a dispatcher?
So to answer the call, you have to be state certified to receive a 911 call.
Yeah.
You have to have certifications through the state 911 department.
Yeah.
To dispatch a call, dispatching is sending your resources.
Sending
you
resources.
do not have to have those certifications.
Okay, thank you. Cool.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we're in kind of a unique situation here, but yeah, John, do you want to say something?
Well, I just have a question.
Okay.
The, in your scenarios there with phase 1, when do you need phase 1 authorized?
We would need phase 1 well, ideally, and I know that's why this meeting is when it is ideally I would like to get that authorized by no later the second week of August, by no later.
Have it authorized and implemented?
Authorized and implemented, so an MOU can be signed between the Southampton and the host community where our 911 calls will be transferred to that host community. Mm-hmm. Again, this is pending based on conversations that I've had with the state 911 department. That is acceptable to them. That is acceptable. We can as long as an MOU is signed by both communities.
Okay.
And then the process would be, at that point, while this stage 1 is in process, we then start working on making our department, on our dispatch center, unstaffed. It doesn't mean it doesn't serve the community anymore. People can still come to the police department. It'll just be, they'll be received more likely than not by some form of video conference with the host agency, and then the host agency will then ask a police officer if somebody's not in the station to report to the department and speak with and receive the person at the door.
And conceptually, what you just described there would be at the completion of phase 2, and then
the completion of phase 2 is in completely.
Well, no, just to be clear, phase 1 is just getting somebody to take over the calls.
Exactly.
Phase
yes.
2 is transitioning the requirements of the warrants and all that stuff
Right.
over to somebody else, and do construction or modifications for the video conferencing.
Yes.
Once that's up and running, we're done with phase 2, and then that's what our police department looks like.
That's what our dispatch center. When you walk into the lobby, that's what you would see. That more likely than not, at least during the evening hours and midnight hours, would be unstaffed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But again, it doesn't mean that there's no services. The
Right.
services, there's still a connection between the public coming to the lobby
Sure.
and services.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we'll probably come back around with more questions, but we have both Easthampton and Northampton here tonight to sort of talk to us a little bit and present their capabilities, what they currently do, what they are interested in doing, what maybe they can help us out with in this situation that we find us in. And so I'll leave it to you to introduce whoever you'd like to come up. I see Northampton's on the screen,
They're
so I
on the
assume
screen.
it's Northampton.
So this is Director Kelly Schutze of the Northampton Dispatch Center.
Okay, good. Hi, Kelly, come on up.
Thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time tonight. I know that's, you already meet a lot, so to come in and to hear us talk. I will try to be as respectful of your time as possible. I'll try to keep this brief and informative. But if you do have questions, if I can answer them tonight, I will. If not, I don't know everything. I'm informed about what we do, but I have a lot of resources I can always lean on to try to get the information for you. So as Chief Illingsworth said, my name is Kelly Schutze. I'm the Director of Communications for the City of Northampton. I grew up in a small town. I'm from Williamsburg. I graduated Hampshire Regional with Chief Illingsworth and Chief Norris. My family is actively involved in the government in Williamsburg, so I do understand the needs and desires of a town government and town needs. I do recognize that this is a really, really difficult decision for you. It's a huge loss for it could feel like a huge loss for the community to lose that walk-in and that feel of knowing who you're talking to on the other side of the line. So I work in the town of Southampton as a dispatcher. I've been here for 12 years. I was a police officer for a year and decided I wanted to stick with communications. My goals, it's really important for me to maintain that same level of service that you're getting now from the Southampton dispatchers with a seamless conversion of services. I don't want the responders to have to feel the pain of now their dispatchers are miles away as opposed to just a walk down the hallway. I would like to establish a regional emergency communication center here in Hampshire County. One of the things that the State 911 Department had asked us in our meeting, why can't Southampton join Westcom and Chicopee or Westfield Communications? I think that there is a definite need to have one in Hampshire County. We have 8 communities here in Hampshire County that are not affiliated. Northampton is the county seat, and we already have a lot of shared services. And it's important to keep these services local. I want to be able to give that same feel to you when you call 911, whether it's somebody sitting at 8 East Street in Southampton or 26 Carlin Drive in Northampton. We have an enhanced infrastructure, and I would like to continue that and expand that into Southampton, whether that is looking at the needs for the fire department with improving their radio communications, getting more repeaters over here. And then open communication and transparency is really important to us and the city. I think that we need to have a lot of dialogue back and forth. I don't want to sit here and promise you the world and not be able to come through on it. I would love to come in here and tell you I'm going to do this for free. That's not a reality. That's not feasible. It's not responsible of me to tell you that. And I'll explain why. So first, let's talk about what regionalization is. They have 2 different models. There's a regional public safety answering point. That essentially is what we're doing in phase 1. We're going to be taking your calls and we're going to let you know that these calls need to be dispatched, or we transfer them to you, which obviously is not a reality right now because you are not going to have certified telecommunicators at 8 East Street. And then there's what's called a REC. That's the Regional Emergency Communication Center, and that's what our goal is to become and recognized by the state. And that just means that we are going to handle all the communications. We're going to handle the documentation in the computer. So it's essentially taking that service out of the police department and putting it into my center. And then out of those 2, there's the host and then there's the district model. The host model is something similar that you'll see in Westfield. Essentially, you have a host community. That host community employs all their dispatchers and you use those services, human resources, IT, legal services. And then the community that joins that host just assists in compensating for those services. And then there's the district model where they are essentially, I likened it to being their own community. They have their own cherry sheet. They have their own support staff like human resources. And I'm not interested in that district model. I don't want to be a mayor. I want to be able to run a communication center. The benefits of regionalization, you consolidate your 911 dispatch centers. So we have a very highly trained staff with a lot of experience in different call natures. It's going to improve your emergency communications. In my center, we have 2 people side by side. One dispatcher might be taking the call and the other one can dispatch. So there's no interruption in talking to the caller. If I'm giving your loved one CPR instructions, I don't have to stop dispatch the ambulance, and then keep updating them back and forth. It just causes confusion. So it's a partnership and collaboration inside that communication center. And again, highly trained professional staff. My staff, actually, I set standards for them to meet, and those are our policies and procedures, but they set their own standards. And when they meet those standards is when their professionalism really shines. The unwritten motto is that you talk to that person on the other end of the line like it's your mom. Treat them with that respect, that dignity, and that compassion. We have standardized protocols. So we are certified in emergency medical dispatch, which everyone in the Commonwealth is, every communication center. But we also have standardized protocols for fire. So it's consistently the same. You can modify what you dispatch, so it's all customizable. We have increased staff to handle increased call volumes. So recently we had all that flooding that was going on. We had an influx of calls and trying to evacuate neighbors and sending out the emergency messages to the citizens, because we do the code red in the dispatch center. Because we had 3 people on that day, it was seamless. There was no gap in service. Anytime we have a fire, one dispatcher is a primary police dispatcher, one is the fire dispatcher. So there is a fully dedicated set of ears on that radio for each discipline. There's risk reduction in standardized protocols and having a good policies and procedures and standardized training. And we also have the opportunity for improved recruitment, because we are one of the higher paying dispatch centers in the area. And we have a pretty comprehensive recruitment program. We display it, we put it on social media. I meet with the candidates in a Zoom session and explain what the job is. They get opportunity to come in and do a sit-along if they wish to do so. It really gets the candidates informed of what the job is before we go through training, and then they realize, oh, this is not what I want. We have modernized communication, so we are in the process right now of upgrading our entire radio system, and it was built on the backs of what the police officers want with their radio communications, what the fire department wants, and the needs of the community. Regionalizing also gives us a chance to have increased grant funding. So you heard a little bit about Chief Illingsworth saying that we have to be approved as a REC, or regional communications. The state has to recognize us before you can get that grant funding, that additional grant funding. And part of the recognition process is, do you have the capacity and do you have the sustainability? I have a small video, and it shows you through the dispatch center. We actually have room to grow. We're not planning on leaving Northampton. We have, like I said, we just redid our radio system. We are the chair for Hampshire County. And we are now developing the Department of Community Care. So there's a lot of moving parts that involve communications directly. We are not interested in going off to Westcom or Westfield. We want to have that communication center. And then there's a cost savings. So if we do get those grant fundings, the community that's coming into the host has a set amount, but it will be offset by the grant. We can do local tailored service to Southampton's needs. So that is actually having a comprehensive list of hydrant locations for the fire department. That is tailoring what you want for a response to your calls for service. Do you need an engine and an ambulance to go to calls, or do you just need an ambulance for that medical call? How many police officers? What do we need for mutual aid? And then familiarity with your current needs and structure. Like I said, I've been working with the department for 12 years, so I do have a lot of experience in your communication center. And then working with myself, who I think I have a good rapport with Chief Illingsworth and the staff at the Southampton Police Department. I haven't had much opportunity to interact with the fire department. We understand the rural community needs and budgets, and we have ample staffing to handle communications. My concern is if we have a major accident in front of Big Y, that's going to be a huge influx of calls for the center. We have the capacity to handle those calls. And my sole function is communications. We don't have a walk-in, so we don't get distracted by the desks or by walk-in traffic. We don't do other police functions, and we're actually in the fire station, so the firefighters aren't allowed to come in, the police officers don't come in and visit, so there's no distraction. We're there, we're focused. So we talked a little bit about phase one previously. We have to do an MOU, or we might be looking at doing an intermunicipal agreement, an IMA, for that first phase. One of the things that I've been talking to my legal services is if we can provide staffing to sit here in Southampton, and that will give opportunity for us to cross-train here. And because currently you have to have somebody sitting at 8 East Street to actually do the dispatching, and that's going to be done by the 2 full-time dispatchers that are remaining, any of the part-timers, and then what do you do with the rest? Do you have a police officer sit there? If we can offer that to you, then that would be through an IMA. The State 911 Department will engage them in conversation about a feasibility study. I will be honest and straightforward. They have said that the feasibility study will take about 2 to 3 months before we can get to phase 2. And then we're going to start preparing for phase 2. I'd like to do a needs assessment survey with the responders, meet with the police department, meet with the fire department. What needs are we meeting currently, and what would you like to see? It's my understanding the fire department still does paper reports. Do they want to go computerized? Is that something that we can offer them? Logistics. So another big piece of it is getting your programs over into Northampton. Through the Obama initiative, they had put in MBI, which is mass broadband. It was a high channel internet fiber network. We have a drop point that is at Southampton Police Department and one that goes to Northampton Police Department. It goes through all communities. It actually goes through Easthampton as well. I'm sure they have a drop point at their police department. That will give us an opportunity to have a direct link right into Southampton Police servers, and we can use their recording program, which is called IMC. That's how they put in all their calls for service. That will also give us opportunity to monitor cameras, so the station cameras. So if they're in booking and something goes bad, we can see it on the camera. We are working on programming the Southampton fire tones into our radio system. We currently have the police and fire channel, but we need to have the toning in there to be able to tone them out. And once we have access to their computer program, I believe I Am Responding will work. That's the notification system that they get on their phone when we put a call for service in. And then training. Cross-training is going to be imperative in this. I want my dispatchers to understand your community, your key locations, any frequent callers, any concerning areas. Why do we offer the service for our aging population to call in and do check-ins with us, and how do we handle those? Those kinds of situations. I actually already have a dispatcher that's working on the training and what that would look like. Establish policies and procedures. I would be working with Chief Illingsworth and Interim Chief Fasoli to come up with policies and procedures that are specific to your department. Identify solutions for the walk-in. What happens when your lobby goes dark? How do we still offer those services that the dispatchers currently offer? What do we do about the people who want to sign out the town hall key? Can we get a vending box? And then public outreach. That's also going to be key. We need to let your community know what's going on and why this is happening, and what kind of services how things are going to change, if at all. So phase 1 costs. I know that's what everyone's on this mind. They sound great. How much is this going to cost us? So there's 2 options that we're considering. This was a really tough decision for us because I do understand that budgeting can be tight. Can we levy the current grant, which I'm not sure if it's been applied for yet. I've reached out to the State 911 Department to ask about that, if we can use that to cover these costs. But the monthly stipend would be $4,000 a month. You get on average 3.92 calls a day, so that ends up being around $33 a call. And a call is every time that 911 phone rings. So whether that is an accident in front of Big Y, or someone put their phone in their cup holder at the golf course and is banging and it keeps calling us, it calls us 5 times, that's going to be 5 calls for service. So there is a per call fee as well if you'd rather go that option. That I was thinking $50 a call. And that's going to be roughly over $5,000 a month. And then we also have to add in our direct costs. So what's it going to cost to use the MBI network? It depends on the bandwidth. So if we're going to be monitoring cameras, obviously the bandwidth is going to be greater, but it looks like it's going to be just under $200 a month, but I can't guarantee that. And then also, if we end up providing staffing for you during phase 1, we have to reach out to Maya and see if there's going to be any increase in the insurance costs, and that will figure into the direct cost as well. We're willing to work with you. We're willing to negotiate if somebody else has a better idea on how we can cover these costs for service. But the other thing is, if we can reach out to the state 911 department and say, listen, we had to do this. This was an emergency. We didn't have time to plan. Most of these transitions take over a year. We didn't have time to plan. Can we get a one-time increase to our support incentive grant and try to cover the cost that way? Phase 2. Phase 2, we're going to be looking at signing an intermunicipal agreement with you. City Council meets August 17th. But the mayor has agreed to try to do a quorum if we need to. It'll be a virtual quorum to see if we can get that signed sooner. We'll reach out to the state 911 department and see if we can qualify for any grants, or do we have to wait until FY25? And then development grant funding. So development grant funding is, the state really wants to push this initiative. So you can use development grant funding to bridge any gaps in technology. You can use it for any number of things. But in FY24, the development grant covered 100% of the town's fees to join a rec for the first 3 years. Then it went down to 50% in year 4 and 25% in year 5. Home run, if we can get that. We'll look at support grant funding. Well, this is when your new fee structure will go in, so that's something that we'll talk about next. And then transitioning all communications over to Northampton, and your lobby goes dark. I'd like to identify a liaison for the police and fire department, both within my center and within the community. I think that we need to have, in the police department, an officer that can reach out to the liaison, so it keeps it on a more communicative level. Address project needs based on the needs assessment study that we're going to do, and regular recurring meetings with the town. Phase 2 costs, we're going to look at what other recs are doing, what's in their IMAs. I know there's a couple of them out there that we can look at. We're going to look at grant funding if it's possible. Like I said, in FY24, the development grant paid for the years 1 through 3, 100%, year 4, 50%, and year 5, 25%. If I'm going too fast and you guys have questions, please let me know.
We'll catch up with you.
Currently, Southampton Communications, so their essential functions, they process emergency 911 calls, they dispatch responders, they monitor radio frequencies, and they coordinate mutual aid partners. All of those services we can provide tomorrow if we had to, and we have the technology and we have the setup to do so. It just requires the agreements. The ancillary functions are the key sign-outs, hire officers for details and overtime, clerical duties, so that would be your walk-in at the lobby, printing out paperwork for in-custody calls, and cell monitoring duties. Those are things we're going to find a solution for you, or we're going to work with the chief to find a solution. Why Northampton? So our people, I'm going to just grab my statistics on my staff. So I have 11 dispatchers, with a minimum of 2 working at all times. On day shift, there's 3, and when we're back to full staffing, which I have 1 person in training, and she's going to be done at the end of the month, that makes 3 on evening shift. 2 of my dispatchers are bilingual in Spanish. We have a pretty diverse dispatch center with a lot of experience. So, sorry, I should have been flipping my sheets as I was talking, but so I have 4 dispatchers with under 5 years experience. I have 3 dispatchers with 5 to 10 years experience, and 5 dispatchers with over 10 years of experience. Like I said earlier, their level of professionalism is superb. I mean, they handle calls very professionally. We have, and as we're progressing through time, callers are getting more difficult to deal with. They've gotten much better about being able to get different resources out there. We have the Department of Community Care coming in, so the city's offering solutions. We have experience in a variety of situations. Just this past year, we had 3 reported active shooter calls, which ended up, thank God, being a spoofing call, so it was a fake call. We had a bomb threat at a school. We've all handled fires, except with the exception of my brand new dispatcher in training. The majority of my staff had worked through a bank robbery. So we have a whole variety. And our medical calls, honestly, we have over 8,000 medical calls in 2022, which combined for Southampton and Easthampton in 2022, it was more 911 calls they received. That's how much medical experience they have. We have an established working partnership with one another because there's two in the center. They don't even have to talk. They just know exactly what the other one needs, which really streamlines communications. It processes the call much quicker, much more fluid. We have, like I said before, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but we have enough staffing to handle a high level, like high call volume. Our technology, we're constantly scanning the environment to see what's out there for technology. Just because it's new technology, we don't need it, but would it benefit our department? Location services has been historically a problem with 911, so we use What 3 Words, which is a location service that's offered through the state. So our next steps, like I said, is a feasibility study. We want to develop an MOU or an IMA, depending on what services you need, determine grant funding, work on policies and procedures, cross-training in the staff. And this board is something that we have in the center, and the dispatchers are allowed to write a quote, and this really does sum up our work environment. We are not a team because we work together. We are a team because we respect, trust, and care for each other. And then if anyone wants to see my center, okay. How do I get this video to play, BJ? Just click on it? Okay.
Come to Northampton Public Safety. Let me bring you inside, show you around.
I don't think there's sound, sorry.
We are an accredited center. We fall under the police department's accreditation, so everything is secure. We have to be either buzzed in or we have to use our fobs to enter. And this is our dispatch center. We have 3 fully operational consoles, and when I say fully operational, I mean that they have the 911 consoles. They have 4 monitors for the dispatchers to perform their duties, whether they're looking at maps, referencing different programs that we use, location services, and then they also have a radio console. In the radio console, the dispatch monitors 3 main Northampton frequencies. We also have Southampton Police and Southampton Fire on the consoles as well that we've just added. And then we have additional mutual aid channels that we can monitor at any moment. It's just a matter of just clicking and changing the frequency. Today we have working Julia Thibodeau. She's been with us for 16 years. Lisa Day has been with me for 24 years. And Emily Claire, she's been with us for 4 months and she's in training and just about ready to go on shift. The other things that the dispatchers have available to them within arm's reach is a whole number of manuals. So it has maps, it has all of our policies and procedures, anything specific to Northampton, and we could include the Southampton manuals as well. So if we move along this way, we have this whole space over here. It's a 10.5 foot by 4 foot conference table. It's a modular conference table, so we can take it apart and move it, and we would be able to add additional consoles if we ended up having any more communities join us. We have a locker room and a bathroom. We have a kitchen available to the dispatchers. My office is right here, so I'm right in the operations floor if they ever need a supervisor immediately when I'm here on duty. And then for our back equipment room, it is a little bit in disarray. We're in the middle of upgrading our entire radio system. So we have our 911 rack. Back behind some of this stuff is we have our UPS. Our UPS is replaced every 10 years, and the batteries are replaced every 5 years. That's an uninterrupted power supply. So if we ever lose shore power, our operations will still sustain. And then we also have a UPS bypass switch, so if the batteries for some reason stop working, we can bypass it and we still keep functionality operational. We also are backup housing for the city's phone system. We have our servers, and then this is our radio rack. We have an additional radio rack in one of our back rooms above our mechanics bay in the fire department that has all of our mutual aid channels, which also has a UPS backup. This room has 2 mini splits to keep it cool in here, enough for the operations to continue. If you notice too, all of our floor has we have a drop floor, so all of the cabling can run underneath the floor. But yeah, I mean, that's a very brief overview. I look forward to discussing more with you, and thanks for coming.
So that sums up my presentation. I know it's a lot of information.
A lot of information, absolutely.
I actually do have printout. I have a different presentation I was going to use. I went with this one instead. But I have printouts, and it has all the information that we've covered today, so you can refer back to it, and I'll hand that out to you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm sure that we do. We'll try to take them slowly, one at a time here, and see if we can get through a few of them.
And my handouts will have my contact information. Please feel free to call or email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions if I leave here and you have questions that come up.
All right, let's take maybe a couple at a time, and we'll kind of go down through and then go back around. So, John?
So, are you a standalone department of Northampton, or do you fall under one of the chiefs?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. We're completely autonomous. I answer directly to the mayor.
Okay.
So we work as a partnership in the public safety team.
Gotcha. And then, if you know this answer or not, how many current open positions do you have?
None.
All right. So that last one that you just hired, how many days did that job go open before you actually filled it, if you know?
Because our process is pretty lengthy, I would say probably a month. It all really depends. So when I receive applications in, I distribute an online test that they have to take, and it tests basic skill sets we would look for in a dispatcher. Once we get those results back, I have them sit down and do a Zoom meeting with me, and I present all the nuts and bolts of the job, and then we do interviews and backgrounds.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm good.
I wondered about interagency communication capability. So let's say there was some tremendous disaster and you've got federal and state and local resources, so a different mix than mutual aid. Can you describe your capability to manage that? Because we've heard over and over that that's really a challenge.
I love that question. Thank you. We actually, our radio consoles, we have 4 VHF channels, 3 UHF channels, and 2 800 channels. And essentially that means that we have all 3 kinds of frequencies, and we can communicate on all of them on the mutual aid. So generally what happens when you have a major event coming in, you may already know this, but usually have MEMA come in with a MEMA trailer, and they do a communications, and they'll do like an operations channel. We actually have that all our operation channels loaded right into our consoles. And so it basically makes direct communication. We can marry the 2 channels together, which is less than ideal, because if, say, Southampton, Easthampton, and Northampton are all responding to an event and they're not using the regional channel, if we match all those channels together, what happens is, say Northampton, where somebody pulls over a car, that's going to go out over all 3 channels. So that's a less than ideal situation. So we prefer to use the tactical channels. We have WEMLAC, which is Western Mass Law Enforcement channel, that you can use for events. You don't want to use that for a long duration event, but if you had a pursuit going from Northampton to Southampton, you would use that. We have on staff from the fire department, we have a COML, which is a communication specialist that's certified in the state. He's on the fire department. We actually have a couple of them, 2 of them. So they are always really good resources. My radio company is out of Pittsfield, so if we need them to come in and add a frequency, it literally took them 20 minutes to put Southampton Police and Fire on our consoles.
And thank you for describing the fail-safe in terms of you losing power in the center, because Montpelier, Vermont had a problem. They had to go and get a generator on top of their police station, which had flooded, and they were losing dispatch, as reported on TV. So take that with a grain of salt. But it's nice to know that should City Hall flood, it's on a hill, but should it flood, you have the power supply and the backup. So
Yes, and we actually have
Answered my second question.
Good, and we do have a generator there, and if we need to have a third generator, I believe the rescue truck has a generator on it that we could use if we had to. That was one of the things that we had talked about during the October snowstorm, and the reason why we have a bypass switch, when I was in the police academy, I got a phone call on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock that everything just shut down, and that's because our UPS died. And we literally had to take extension cords and plug everything into the wall. So that's, we learn through error and issue.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Joy? Go on.
Sure. You mentioned feasibility and needs assessments. Who would be doing those? What would the cost be? Would we be responsible for that cost?
Sure, thank you. The feasibility study actually is done by the State 911 Department, so there is no cost for that. Either they do it in-house or they're contracted with the Collins Center to do the study. And it's a pretty comprehensive study. I've looked at some of the other REX studies. It really does give you a map of what you want to do. I think that the needs assessment study would be done in-house. I think it's more of meeting with the responders and finding out what it is that they need, what goes well, what do they need help with, and is there solutions that we can consider? And there would be no charge because we would be doing that. If we end up hiring a contractor, then that would come out of either the direct costs or grants.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing, going back to your question, Mr. Johnson, was about the radios too. We do monitor, we have a direct communication with our school department as well. It's a school 911 channel if they ever have an emergency, and we've used that multiple times for medicals or juveniles leaving the schoolyard.
And I just had one more very basic question, is more particular to the viewers at home. Currently, what are the shared services between Northampton and Southampton?
I don't know if we have any shared services with Southampton. Some of the shared service that Northampton does have is the weights and measures, the hearing officer, we're the regional hearing officer. Our Board of Health, our Board of Health has assisted, I think, with vaccinations. I know Southampton had gone over for the vaccinations. We have flu clinics, vaccination clinics. Building inspector's office is also, and veteran services. But I don't think that, I'm not sure if we have any with Southampton specifically.
That's true.
Thank you.
Sure?
The hearings officer.
The hearing officer? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Dan?
Oh, you mentioned that you had some video monitoring capability. What do you monitor the schools in Northampton at all?
Not currently. That's not something the schools want us to have. I don't know why. We do monitor the police department, the public spaces in the police department. They don't have us watch the booking or anything like that because they have a desk officer there. We are not opposed to having a connectivity to the schools. It would be an agreement.
Would they have to have that Ethernet, or sorry, the fiber network that you talked about? Be connected to that?
I'm connected to my thing. I have a map of the broadband. I don't have that answer.
They probably would be, right? Just
If they can connect to Southampton Police through your own fiber, then I believe, again, I don't have that answer. I'd have to check with my IT department.
Okay, yeah. The other question I had was sometimes people have non-emergency calls to make to the police department, questions, things they're wondering about. What's our plan for that? Would that still go to dispatch? Would that still, are we handled locally?
During phase 2, we would take it. I'm sorry, did you want to? Phase 1, it would still be at 8 East Street because your phones will still be there. That's a solution that we have to come up with, how the phones would get over, whether it's forwarded, whether we explore the idea of doing a phone tree. So not all calls have to go through dispatch because sometimes they want to just request a report. And so do we set up a line for that? That's a bigger conversation, but we would be taking your business lines as well in phase 2.
Okay, so that's a phase 2 question.
That's correct.
Great.
Can I follow up on that?
Go ahead.
So if one of my goats gets out, and which has historically happened, that phone call is going to be coming from your dispatch center?
In phase 2. Don't worry, we have llamas that get out.
Okay. I just
And we
wanna
know that in order to
It's
bring a
not
llama back, you have to put it in a headlock, and they live on this certain
Okay.
location.
So will it say Northampton Police Department on it? Because I have it saved now when the Southampton Police Department calls me. So I just want to make sure.
That would be something I don't have an answer for right now.
I think we all have the experience with rogue animals in town, walking down the streets. We've definitely had our
Absolutely.
share in Southampton as well.
Well, if I may, and in the spirit of lightness, what I need and wonder about is the burn permit, you know? It's a lovely day in season, and I need to get rid of some brush.
That's the fire department.
So I would call the non-emergency line at Southampton Fire, and we'd take care of it. This would ultimately, I assume, go through Northampton.
That would actually be a question that we would work with the fire department on. We process all the burn permits for Northampton, but if it's still, because you still need to have phone lines in both locations. Like the fire department has to have a direct line, the police department has to have a direct line. So if they want to continue to process it over the phone and then just call us and say, hey, the resident at 22 Fulmore Road is burning, we just mark it off in our system and we know.
Okay.
Yes.
And I would tell you no right now because it's not burn season. But if you had a hot dog.
There you go. Good answer. All right, couple from me, too.
Wait, I think Dan still has
Dan,
them.
go
I
ahead,
interrupted
sorry.
him.
We can,
Nope.
it's all
Yeah,
good? Okay.
Yeah, I'll let you go.
I might be stealing this one from Mr. Lumbra, but I don't think he'll mind. So how is, in your model, how will Southampton be able to maintain its voice in the decision-making process?
Those are going to be through our regular meetings with the police and fire chief. I envision those to be weekly at first, then start to span out, and then having that direct communication. I think it's really important because this is your community, it's not my community, it's not Northampton. You know your needs, you know what your community needs, you know what the capabilities of your departments. I don't want to make decisions for you. That would be communication, and, you know, the chief would absolutely, we would co-write policies.
And my last question is a trick question.
Okay.
How many towns does Glendale Road go through?
Well, it depends on which Glendale Road we're talking about. Yeah. So if you're talking about Glendale Road in Easthampton, that goes through, I don't know if it touches Westhampton, but I know it touches Northampton and Florence. Goes through Easthampton, and it goes down off of, oh my goodness. Come on!
The point of my question is that we obviously have common names and street names in our towns, and my concern over training the people to ensure that they respond to the right town, you know? Obviously, first question is make sure they know which town the call is coming from.
If they're calling through 911, when we take a call on 911, our policy is, what is the address of your emergency? Can you repeat that for verification purposes? So the caller has to say it twice, because if I just say, oh, Glendale Road in Northampton, yes, hurry up, get here, that's gonna, there's room for error right there. But if you have to repeat it twice to me, and I can see on my 911 screen it's in Southampton, and you're telling me yes, well, sir, you're mapping in Southampton. We do a lot of verification on that. If it's on the business line, there's going to be some decision that we have to make if Southampton is going to either ring different or come in a different line. Is there a different bank of phone lines that you're going to come in? So that will be a visual indication to the dispatchers that it is a Southampton call.
I bring that question up because I live on a Glendale Road, and I had that problem when they went to the wrong Glendale.
Oh my goodness, and trying to deal with the post office in that scenario, it's difficult.
But thank you.
Yes, of course.
Kelly, a couple for me, if you don't mind. I think just, backing up a step, how long has the dispatch center been in existence in Northampton? I mean, was it ever combined with police and fire, or it's always been a standalone?
So, nope, it used to be done by the Northampton Police Department, and it was a transfer right to the fire station when they were on Masonic Street, if it was a fire call. And in 1999, they opened the dispatch center. I was one of the original employees, as was Lisa Day in the video. And originally they wanted to put us in the police department, but I don't know if you remember then, the police department literally was a closet where the desk officer was, so there wasn't room. So they were building the new fire station where Burt Tractor was on King Street.
On King Street, yeah.
So they thought that would be an ideal location. And the person that set up the dispatch center, he actually had a lot of foresight and made it big enough for expandability.
Okay, all right. So you said, I think that you said you had 3 consoles now with 4 monitors, is that right?
Yep, so we have 3 full consoles, which have the 911 system, and the state 911 department determines how many consoles you get, and it's based on population size. So if we were to exceed 50,000 people, we would get another console position. So we have those 3, and then we have a separate console, if you will, but it doesn't have 911. We use that for training and kind of as a supervisor console, and that has IMC, which is our recording software, like our documentation software, and it has a radio position as well as the different monitors. Each of the 3 consoles have 4 monitors for the dispatchers to use for monitoring cameras, reading logs, using for mapping service. We have an internal mapping service, so when we have a fire, like we can pull up the closest hydrant. If there's a location that has a really long driveway, we have that opportunity to access that information. They use Google like you would not believe, especially because so many new businesses come to Northampton. We've never heard of them. We Google it if they're not in our system. So yes.
It's been around. So then you mentioned too that this idea of becoming a rec. So right now, in spite of the size of Northampton, you're not qualified by 911 to be a rec yet, is that right?
Correct.
But by taking on Southampton, potentially you would want to be one.
Yes.
But that's where the feasibility study has to happen first before the state 911 would approve that. Is that correct in terms of the order of
That is correct,
steps?
the order of
Okay.
steps. So first we address the stopgap measure and deal with the staffing issue here in Southampton and taking the 911 calls, and then we would look at doing the feasibility study.
What would be, and the way I'm understanding this, the advantage of you being a rec would be you're able to qualify for 911 grants that would be the cost offset to the town, the way I'm hearing how you presented that. Is that correct?
And there are other advantages to becoming a rec. I know that Massachusetts was at the home rule state where the state can't tell you as a community what you need to do. So they can't ever come to Southampton and say, you have to do this or you have to do that. But what they can do is they can be like, well, we're taking our 911 console out of here unless you pay us to maintain it, which is why they're looking at regionalization, is they're trying to eliminate and reduce the number of equipment locations out there for, obviously it's aging. It's computerized. Everything's computerized. So there's a lot more upkeep to it, a lot more licensing fees, things like that. So that's why they're pushing this initiative.
So if for some reason, whatever there could be, the state 911 decided that they didn't want Northampton to be a rec for whatever reason, would you still be interested and or able to take on Southampton?
Oh, we absolutely could do both. Yes, I would still be interested. We're still going to get grant funding from the state. They still offer the support, but we just won't get the incentive piece of it. I don't know, and I've asked, what if that were to happen, what happens to Southampton support and incentive grant and training grant? I don't know if that just dissipates or if that gets added.
Yeah, because I think we get that every year, right, Ian? That's around.
Yes, and I have not applied for that right now because of what
we're working on. Okay, all right. I've got a couple more, but I'll start again. John?
Yeah, what is your, I know you plan with the backup and the override switch, but who is your backup PSP? If you went down, where does it go to?
Easthampton is our backup. We may consider seeing if Westfield can be the backup because they're already the backup for Hadley and Northampton, which if we have a really bad storm come through that corridor, it's going to overwhelm them. It would overwhelm any community, but.
Okay. And then as far as phase 1 is concerned, I know you had suggested the 4,000 there, but have you had discussions with whoever you need to, whether it's the mayor or the head of the council, and you have authority to, if we vote to go that way, we don't have to wait for something to happen over there for purposes of phase 1?
We have to do an IMA or an MOU. But as far as the pricing, I do have the autonomy to make that decision. I have had discussions I actually met with the mayor today, legal services, and our finance director.
Okay, and no roadblocks as far as you know for phase one?
I'm sorry?
No roadblocks as far as you know for phase one?
No roadblocks especially for financial
Okay.
issues.
I'm good.
Stephen, anything else right now?
Plus direct costs.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you,
Right.
plus direct costs.
that can be properly documented in triplicate.
Right, yeah.
No car washes.
I'm going to deviate a minute. Oh, okay, go ahead. Yeah,
I do
thought
have
you-
a question
Yeah, go.
because I know coming online in Northampton is really wonderful, whole new department, your community health center, and you'll be considering those resources as you dispatch in Northampton. Does Southampton acquire any enhanced access to that, or is that a completely separate conversation we might contemplate?
For a community responder, mental
Well,
health?
the kind of mental health support, wherever it is sourced from.
I believe that you contract with Behavioral Health Network. Is that the case?
Not anymore. They don't exist. It's a different company.
Right, and so Northampton uses community support options, I think.
So we already have a resource where you're building a facility that will house resources.
So the police department has applied they've been receiving a grant, and we have 2 mental health technicians on staff that we currently dispatch, and they're part of the police department. But through the whole, where they were trying to defund the police department, there was the initiative built to have the Department of Community Care, which is peer response. It's a peer response model. That's a city department. I don't know if that's something that they are willing to do a shared, because it's such a new department, they're still developing it. We have no idea what our call volume is going to be for it.
Can you talk about that? You're saying there's a risk that you're going to defund your police department?
No, that was when they were talking about it a couple years ago.
Oh, okay.
So one of the solutions was to have the Department of Community Care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I heard it wrong.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to deviate. Chief Fasoli, might you have a question or two, since you're here in the audience? Would you have a question or two? Feel free. Not yet? Okay. All right. Joy, anything else?
Just from what's on here,
Yeah?
just to follow up.
Go ahead and pick one.
Sure. Does your facility, I don't think you've mentioned it, but does your facility have criminal justice information services?
Not currently. So that will be a roadblock right now, and that's something that we are working through and having conversations about. I'm waiting for my coordinator to come back from vacation to ask him about the Northampton licensure.
Can you explain a little bit more about what that would
Yes.
do for us and what?
Yep, so the Criminal Justice Information Systems is the system that the police department uses to run warrant checks, vehicles, when cars in an accident, they run all the information. The operator makes sure they're authorized to operate a motor vehicle in Massachusetts. It's to look at their border probation checks, so a criminal history, driver history, things of that nature. Currently, the Southampton Police Department can run that from their MDTs in some of their cruisers, but the station runs that information for them, and they provide that information. Northampton, we don't have it in the dispatch center because we have a desk officer that runs all the information. We are going to have access to be able to run license plates and peoples, but I can't answer whether or not, because that's under Northampton's license. I don't know if we can use that for Southampton. So that is a conversation that we are trying to have with the Criminal Justice Information Systems Board. There's an option to apply for a license, but I believe it takes 3 to 6 months, but I can't verify that because, again, I'm not the coordinator.
But just to clarify, that's an obstacle to phase 2, not phase 1. 'cause
Correct.
Phase 1, we would continue to staff.
Correct.
And so that ties into your earlier comment, I think, about you all not being distracted, right? That you're only a communication dispatch service, not all these extracurricular kinds of services that the police department provides. Is that-
Correct, but this is a vital service. I feel is a vital service for officer safety reasons.
But you've got it through a desk officer who sits where, at the police department? Or?
Yes,
Oh,
for Northampton.
I see.
I don't know what the solution will be for Southampton.
I see, okay.
Sorry,
Yeah,
you went
Jen?
over this, you said this before. How did you work out the math for, it was either $4,000 a month or $33 a call?
So I took your average call volume is 1,433 for calendar year 2022.
Yep,
Divided that by 365, which is 3.92.
yep.
And then I took that number, and I took the $4,000. I'm sorry, hold on. I determined what your monthly call volume was, which I don't have it off the top of my head. I have it on this if you want me to plug it back in. But it's 3.92, or you can do 1433 divided by 12 months.
Okay.
And then I took the $4,000 and divided it by that number, which is an hour. It's like, I think it's 34 or 33 or something.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, I wonder if there's like a curve to our call volume, or if it's.
There is, when we're looking, so I have the call volume here. There is a very clear increase in call volume across everywhere, every community, because a lot of that has to do with the accessibility of cell phones. So people are starting to get, you can see a decline in landline, which is the home phones, and an increase in cell phones. I forgot where I was going with that. But you had 1,433, and they didn't look at the COVID years. In 2019, you had 899. 2018 was 843, and oddly, 2017, you had 925. So it was up, down, kind of level, and went back up again.
I'm sorry, I'm being more specific to the month by month. Like, are we going to see a big cost, say, in December versus July? Like, is there typical trends?
I don't know what the trends
I
are.
thought you were, just to clarify, are you proposing a flat $4,000 per month?
Per month.
For phase one, regardless if we have a spike in the second month or not?
Correct. It would be a flat $4,000, which makes it budgetable. You know exactly what you're going to pay every month versus that per call fee, which you could get one phone call, or if you have an accident, that could be 7 phone calls. It's really hard to predict.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the summer months, people are out getting exercise, they're riding their bikes, which tends to be those false calls.
Right.
So, and every time there's a new iPhone version put out, if you buy a new iPhone, if you hit the side button 5 times, it calls 911.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I understand there are 2 options. I just wanted to understand the second option of per call.
We also see a call increase at Christmas time when everyone gets new Apple Watches.
There we go. Joy, anything else?
That's what's on here.
Okay. Anybody else? A couple more? Yep. Yeah,
I
Stephen?
apologize, I took so long.
Yeah. Okay, couple
Well,
more.
more on the information systems, the detail. Southampton uses the I Am Responding program, so I'm sure you know. Do you have the capability of working with that now, or what would that entail?
It's not something that Northampton Fire currently uses, but it's an internet-based program and is driven by IMC, which is the computer program that tracks their calls. So when you put in a call for service and it's fire-related, it'll automatically kick over to I Am Responding. That's my understanding of it. And that's when the Southampton firefighters get an alert that it's like a pre-alert that they have a call coming.
And that's only for fire, not anything else?
Correct, fire and ambulance.
Right. And right now, Northampton has more of a full-time fire team, right? I mean, it's not an on-call service like we are.
Correct. Yep. So Northampton's a full-time fire department, and that's another piece of the training that we're addressing. I have a dispatcher who worked in Williamsburg as a firefighter, so he's familiar with the processes of being a call volunteer service. That I've asked him to help me out with the training piece of that.
Okay. Is there something that you foresee, given all this explanation, and we'll probably end it up in a couple minutes here, just in terms of the biggest obstacle you see going forward? Is it the feasibility study? Is it what?
So there's 2 obstacles that I foresee going forward. One is the Criminal Justice Information System, CJIS. And the second is going to be the being accepted as a REC. I am confident that we can make a good argument as to why we should be recognized as a REC, because there are 8 communities in Hampshire County that are not affiliated with a regional center, and if the state is pushing that, so say we're not, and say that you decide to go with Easthampton or Westfield, what happens when Hadley, Belchertown, and Granby all say, we can't do this anymore, we need to go to a regional center? Westcom and Chicopee doesn't have the capacity right now. Their building won't be ready for a year. What do we do with those? So I think that we have, so the things that they look at is capacity. Do you have the ability to expand? Do you have the staffing, and do you have the technology? And we can say yes to all of those. If we were to take a higher call volume, community, so say Hadley wants to join us, they have a higher call volume than Southampton. We may need to up our staffing.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to ask, I mean, do you feel like you've got enough staffing right now to take on Southampton, or you'd have to increase staffing?
no, we absolutely have enough staffing to handle the call volume in Southampton.
Okay.
And we have enough staffing to handle the call volume in Southampton at the level of service and more.
Okay. And you mentioned something, I think, about cross-training. So would that be the idea that some of the Northampton folks would come here and fill in the slot temporarily?
In phase one, if we can get an IMA and Maya agrees to any insurance concerns, like if it's just going to be an increase in our insurance, then I would like to have the dispatchers work in Southampton to cross-train. But the other piece of cross-training would be doing ride-alongs with the police officers and if the fire
department just to get used to the town and understand the logistics and just geography of the town, right?
Correct. Who better knows the town than the responders that are out there going to these calls? You know, to learn that Upper Fulmer Road, you have to, one of the lieutenants told me, he's like, he would draw a line and then he'd go up later on and if there was tire tracks across the line, he knows that somebody was down in the woods. And I was like, would have never thought about that. That's good to know. It's that kind of local knowledge that I would want the dispatchers to learn and know. I mean, quite honestly, my current staff aren't from Northampton. One's from Wilbraham. I'm from Williamsburg, but I used to go and hang out in Northampton all the time. One of them is from Ware. I had somebody who was from Connecticut and Ohio, Indiana. They learn that local community, but it's all about the training that you're providing to them. You have to have that philosophy. It's important because the other thing is, as a small community, it is more dangerous for that officer out on the street than it is in Northampton because their backup might not be right there. It might take 15, 20 minutes. They may be in a remote part of town that if they're struggling with somebody on the side of the road, they're not as visible. We need to make sure that we understand the needs. And the radio communications isn't always wonderful here.
And I think you said that the radio frequencies and everything are matching right now. You've got Southampton on your console, and there's not an issue with radio communications at this point in time?
Correct. We've tested it. The only thing we have to do is we have to program the fire tones.
Okay. And I think my last question is, should there be, and I don't know, but should there be any of our part-time dispatchers that might want to continue working, would there be a way for them to perhaps work at the Northampton site?
That is a conversation. So because we're full staff, that is a conversation that we would have to have. Our training program for Northampton alone is 4 months and it's full-time. They would, I mean, obviously the Southampton dispatchers have the certification, but we use a different vendor for our emergency medical dispatching, so they'd have to attend that training. They'd have to attend the fire protocol training, which is another 2 days. I would not be opposed to it, but right now we don't have the staffing. We would have to figure out what to do.
You don't have the vacancies for it?
Correct. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. I don't have the vacancy.
Okay. All right.
So
Anybody else?
just, you don't have any part-time, you don't use any part-time staff?
No, sir, we do not. The only time that we have part-time is it's a per diem. So if somebody left Northampton, they've gone through the training program, and they say they want to go work for the senior center, we've actually had that. She stayed on for per diem for me because she's trained in Northampton. She hadn't been gone longer than she worked, so all of her certifications were relevant. Her training was relevant. That's the only time I use per diem dispatchers. I won't take somebody, we don't hire someone from the outside to cover currently.
Okay. All right.
Can I just
Go ahead.
one last, sorry. In regards to policies and procedures for logging protocols for EMS dispatch and radio, obviously Southampton has their own. How would Northampton approach either collaboratively working with the Southampton and how they implement the policies and procedures, and how much authority and control would the town be able to still have over that?
So let me just make sure I understand the question, because I don't want to not answer it correctly. Are you asking about how we log calls for service for EMS?
Who would, actually, I'm going to hand it over to Chief Illingsworth, because I think that he knows the system better.
Sure.
So there's two questions I think were in there. The first question would be migrating our record system to the city of Northampton. And is that something that you're capable of and willing to do, as well as documenting logs and so forth?
Sure, I'll answer that first.
Yep.
So through MBI, through the fiber network, if we can have access to the Southampton server, we can have the same program if I'm sitting here or sitting there, logging that information in. The other option is to purchase an interagency license with IMC, because we do use the same recording software. The interagency IMC license, and I have to check it because I think that it's very important that Southampton can't see Northampton and Northampton can't see Southampton, that their logs are going to be completely separate. And that's for press release, anything like that. Like, they need to have comfort in knowing that their information is secure, and same with Northampton Police. But as far as fire records, the fire department uses First Due for the reporting for Northampton, and Southampton, we do it on paper, and then they call us for their times, and I believe it's entered through emergency response systems, which is also something that we've worked with in Northampton. So I would actually entertain the idea, and I would, it obviously would go through the fire chief, if that's something that they want to integrate the two systems, where when we put a call into IMC, it'll kick over to ERS. So.
And the second part?
I think part two of that was the Southampton Police and Fire Department having some form of authority and control over our own policies and procedures in the form that they're dispatched, or as well as written policy and procedure. There are protocols, dispatching protocols, and written policy and procedure.
Sure. So our dispatching protocols, like I said, we are certified in emergency medical dispatch and emergency fire dispatch through Priority Dispatch Corporation. It's computerized, and we have the option to actually enter in what we're going to send. So for Northampton, a cardiac arrest is going to get an engine, an ambulance, and an officer. But we can know Southampton will get an engine, an ambulance, and 2 officers. So we have that ability, and those are going to be all driven from police and fire department. Like I said previously, it's not up to me to make the decision what happens in your community. Obviously, I'm not going to talk, like, I'm not going to accept, well, you have to call the police officer on their cell phone, and you're going to call the fire chief at home. It needs to be consistent. It needs to have within reason. And same with policies and procedures. I would like to co-author them, so I could take the current dispatch policies and procedures and just put it in my own format. And obviously, we would both have to sign off on it.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything? One very, very last one.
Yeah.
Time frame in terms of trying to get the CJIS system at the dispatch center.
I don't have, that's going to have to be a follow-up, or we'll have to table that conversation, because my CJIS coordinator is on vacation, as is my police chief. My police chief, I think, is back on Monday, and the coordinator's not back till the 30th. But if we were to apply, and I have to communicate with CJIS. I've not had any contact with them yet. If we were to apply for our own license, I believe it was 30 to 60 days, no, 3 to 6 months, I think.
That's when we reached out to Criminal Justice Information Service to see if Northampton's even capable of
Being part of it?
being part of CJIS. And the explanation was that if they become a rec center, they have to apply for their own, what they call it, ORI. And every community has every police department, I should say community, every police department has an assigned ORI number if they have the capabilities and means to use the CJIS system, right? Some smaller departments might not even have that. They might just go through the state. However, obviously, Southampton, we want to maintain our own ORI. However, we do need a facility that can run our plates, and they also have to be able to monitor. Hit confirmation. So when we enter a stolen vehicle, when we enter there's a missing person, like I told you today earlier. Today, a missing person was discovered in Southampton from a road detail officer, and that person was out of Pennsylvania. Well, Pennsylvania would send us a message through OpenFox, they call it OpenFox, to confirm that this person is missing. You need somebody 24/7 to be able to monitor that, because if it's not being monitored and we don't get a hit confirmation, that person could get released.
Got it.
And I've also reached out to the regional directors in Massachusetts to ask some questions about their implementation process, like, how long it took and things of that nature. But the people that have responded, I've reached out to ask them what their solutions were. If they're a standalone center, what do they do for CGIS? And I have a gentleman that I'm working with as a consultant on a separate project. I just asked him, because he's consulting a couple communities in Eastern Mass on regionalizing. So I was picking his brain about that today, and he has to get back to me.
Okay, good.
And I'm just going to give you copies.
Yeah,
of this.
no, please, yeah. So thank you very much for,
And my contact information is on the last page. So if you do have questions, please feel free to email me, but I would recommend doing it as a group email
yeah.
to go to
Yeah, we would.
Don't worry.
We wouldn't bombard you with 25 separate emails there.
But that way, it also, you know what the other people are asking, and
Sure.
that might provoke more conversation.
Right, and please give one to our town administrator there. Yeah, or yeah, somebody there, yeah. Perfect, okay. Well, thank you very much. A lot of information. All right, next up, I think we have Easthampton. This would be Chief Alberti, right? All right, welcome.
No, I didn't bring a PowerPoint.
Okay, let's just talk.
Mine will be super brief. Bob Alberti, Police Chief of Easthampton. Thank you for having us here tonight. I can speak to CGIS if you want me to. Sure. So CGIS is actually run by the FBI, and it's a law enforcement entity, and the FBI. I talked to CGIS today. They said the FBI will not allow a CGIS center in a fire station. Okay. And they also said because they have one line at the police station, they would never authorize another line at the fire station. That's what they told me. Kelly may have some more information coming. As far as the dispatch centers go, I would have given the same presentation. So Easthampton we're smaller in area, but we have the capability to put another station in for Southampton. Let me just get my notes. I was making notes while you were asking questions. So my background, just a little bit about me. I grew up in Southampton. My mother dispatched here in the 80s. They had the fire phones at the house when I was a little kid. Sure. Not a little kid, but. And I also worked, my mother worked for dispatch, my father worked for the fire department, and I worked for the police department. So we're very familiar with Southampton. Essentially, we're a plug and play. We want to help our neighbors. We integrate with Southampton on a multitude of levels. Police, mutual aid, the fire department's contracted for your EMS. We too would work towards regionalizing, so the phases would be the same. Phase 1, phase 2 would be the same for us. As far as money goes, which I know is a big topic, right? I don't see or foresee why we would charge for phase 1. We just wouldn't. We have the capacity now to just take the 911 calls and call over here. We have both radios in our system. We have to get the fire tones. We do use IM responding, right, Chief? So the fire department already has it. We would absorb your staff too. I think you have 2 full-time dispatchers. So we would be able to, instead of them collecting unemployment, if Southampton came over with us in phase 2, we would absorb them. So we would hire your staff. We know them. One of them has worked for us in the past, part-time, so we're familiar with that. I talked to the mayor today and the city council president. They've been on board, so that's not an issue. And the rest of it's exactly the same. The MOU, the dispatch center itself, the parts of the grant processes. Yeah, so I mean, that's really my presentation. We're here to help. And we could and we have, I'm responding, the chief said he could flip that switch tonight if we had to. We have IMC. I would envision an IMC terminal for Southampton in our dispatch center so that we would log into Southampton's IMC all of their calls. That's how I would foresee that, and that's something that Chief and I can talk about, and the fire chief too. You guys use IMC, right?
Dispatch.
Right, okay, yeah, so again, it's, my sales pitch is, I don't have a sales pitch. We're here to help.
You're the closest neighbor, right?
Yeah, we're a plug and play, we're here to help. Whatever we can do, and I said to Ian, Chief Illingsworth, that in the very short term, we just want to cast a safety net under your emergency,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, definitely, that's helpful. Yeah, a couple questions? Yeah, Stephen, go ahead.
You can go first.
This may need a rebuttal from Northampton. You address the criminal justice information system, but what about state approval to become a regional center?
We would have to go through the same process as,
Yeah.
right.
Handicap your chances, one versus the other. Neighboring town, leapfrogging town, I don't think that's relevant, but what issues are?
I really can't speak to that, other than I think that because we are already integrated, it just makes more sense to me. If I was looking to regionalize with anybody, it'd be Easthampton and Southampton. Fun fact, 70s, 80s, Easthampton and Southampton were on the exact same frequency. So we're kind of like repeating history. But in this case, the chiefs would have their own frequencies and basically their own setup. And we would encourage, absorbing your folks.
And you've already got the CGIS system in place, yeah.
Yep. I mean, and the FBI, they do audits. They're very finicky about who's in there. And everybody, are you guys Corey cleared? All of it? Okay, so that's not a hurdle. But anybody that goes into a dispatch center has to be Corey cleared. I mean, so you have to do an extensive background. He is not Corey is. And technically, we're in a public safety complex, but technically, our firefighters are not allowed in the dispatch center for that very reason.
Okay, yep. Similar, yeah.
Your current setup, so if we were to go with you initially, would you have to add additional stations or work people, or would your current configuration?
Phase 2 we would.
In 2, okay.
Phase 1, we could do it tonight.
Yep, with the existing resources that you have. Yep.
And again, I think the chief said they average like 4 911 calls a day. And we staff with 3 dispatchers as well. And then two on a desk, 3 during the day. And then we do 2 swing shifts too.
And then with your current footprint that you have, would it allow for expansion?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we could put 1 more station in. We do some reconfiguring of what we have now.
And so along those lines, if we were over there and you did go for regionalization, do you believe that would be the extent of your regionalization, or would you continue to chase after other towns?
We're it.
Yeah.
The chief and I talked about that today, and I'm sure the fire chief would be in agreement. I think capacity would be an issue for, and again, Northampton does a wonderful job. She's awesome. I think if I don't know what their call volume is overall, the whole city, police, fire, and EMS. I have no idea what it is, but it's a lot. So I don't know where Southampton would be prioritized if something really bad happened. And we're in South. I'd get a call and I'd send cruisers to go help round up her goats. That's what, we do it all the time. And we're over here. It's an interesting concept, at least from the police perspective. Most cities and towns, their backup is state police, for the most part. If Ian called the state police to come help his officers or help him, they're coming from 91 in Holyoke. We're right. So we work together constantly. Several of our firefighters already work in Southampton part-time. Billy Milkey is one of my patrol officers. He's a lieutenant here on the fire department. The whole thing just makes sense to me. But for the here and now, I just want to get that net underneath you guys.
Talk about how many staff you have. Do you have both full-time and part-time dispatch, or?
We have 1 part-time.
We have 7 full-timers, including myself, and we have 1 part-timer that works 20 hours per week.
So it would make good sense for us to put another station in and then, absorb your 2 full-timers if they would want to continue to work. And we don't pay as much as Northampton, but we certainly, we pay a decent amount of money.
So you haven't had the recruiting issues that other towns have had in some cases? I mean,
No. And Brenda and I were talking about that when you had a question earlier. I'm sorry, Brenda Therian Shoup is my dispatch supervisor, I'm sorry. We posted one position, full-time position, and we had it filled within a week.
Really?
Yeah, so dispatch has not been an issue. Policing now is an issue for me and everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I think we've heard over time, I mean, no matter what facility, from fire to police to dispatching, and just the ability to attract qualified candidates and be able to, there's a big demand out there and very few of them that really perhaps are interested in moving
And retain
around
them.
too much. Yeah.
And the younger generation, money's not really a big deal for whatever reason. We can't get them to work overtime or details. It's just mind-boggling to me. That's a story for a different day.
Okay. Some other questions, Joy or Dan? Anything else that we haven't kind of heard in our? Don't want to short shift you here in terms of.
No. I knew I was going to be brief.
I'll just ask the same question, and I'll try to get it right this time, Chief Illings. Would you keep Southampton logs separate, and would you allow Chief Illingsworth to have say over what those policies and procedures are?
Yeah, police chiefs are control freaks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I didn't tell.
So the reality is nothing for the most part would change for Ian other than the location. He would have full access to our systems, full access to our building. And again, we all work together now on a daily basis. And we would have to keep them separate for public records requests. Yeah. So they have to be separate. And I'm sure that we get inundated with them, and I'm sure Chief Illingsworth does as well. So it's easy for him to go in his own system and find it and try to surf through two systems together. So we would absolutely do that.
Thank you.
And we're on the same IMC system, so that's not an issue.
Dan, anything?
Yeah, so it's interesting you say you could flip a switch tonight. Wouldn't there be some type of, would you want to give your dispatch people some type of training about Southampton, or do you feel they already have some core knowledge? Or how do you feel
as far as
confident that you could just that you could help us out immediately? I appreciate that.
No,
help us immediately, but.
Because the state regulates dispatch centers. So the cross training would be sending my dispatchers here and sit in a desk here, and how their setup is. We do the same EMD, the emergency dispatching, so if you guys called 911, like if we called tonight, if we were your rollover, right, it's the same thing.
Okay.
So if your 911 system's jammed up and we're your backup, we're getting those calls anyway. So we would handle those calls like we handle them in Easthampton, they handle them in Northampton, Westhampton, the calls are all pretty much handled the same. And for us specifically, the EMD piece and the IMC piece, we already, both dispatch centers have that. So they already know how to do that. It'd really be location. 911 on Glendale Road in Southampton, not Glendale Street in Easthampton or Glendale Road in Northampton.
Yeah, so another question about that.
Phase two, obviously phase two would be, a different story. There'd be,
did you at some point present us anything about costs?
No, and really the cost, in my opinion, I'm not going to stand here and tell you what I'm going to charge you because A, that's not my job. Yeah. And really that should be worked out between the select board and the mayor's office. Yeah.
Okay.
That's, and I can speak for me and Chief Norris in that I don't foresee, and I don't think the chief does either, why if we take 4 911 calls a day from Southampton and call on a radio over here to the desk officer and say, hey, you got a crash on in front of Big Y. Not only are we giving you that call, I'm sending cars there to help. So I don't foresee why we would, and we have the staffing, we're fully staffed too. I don't know why we would charge for 4 911 calls. It just doesn't.
So at least in that interim.
Yeah, the phase one.
Emergency phase.
And I wouldn't, I mean, I don't know the legalities or the logistics of an MOU, but like I said, we come over here all the time and help out without an MOU. I guess maybe 911 would require it for the change. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So with the, somewhere it was mentioned, the I am responding system, so Easthampton 2 is a full-time fire station, right? So-
And we're full-time fire and EMS,
Right.
and Southampton is contracted with Easthampton for medical services from Easthampton. And I know our ambulance is over here all the time with paramedic intercepts and helping the chief out.
Okay. But the on-call system is something that maybe your dispatchers would have to get used to? I mean, just a different
Well,
situation
it'd be a matter of setting out tones and getting on the radio, right, chief?
Yeah, okay.
But are you asking specifically what I am responding?
Yeah.
I think you said earlier they already.
You're already on the.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, and that's way out of my league.
I see, okay.
And Chief Norris said I can't call him up here.
Gotcha, already on there, all right.
I have another question. So, say you said phase 1, you basically cover for free. That gives us time to talk to the mayor and figure out what the costs would be going for phase 2
Right,
and
yeah,
forward.
and that's where the cost, in my opinion, and again, I'm not a dispatch guru by any means. Kelly definitely is. It makes sense to me that would buy time to get into the grants, get into the proposals from the state 911 and the feasibility study, and it'll buy Southampton time essentially.
Yeah, I agree with you. My concern is, let's say we start negotiating with Easthampton, they come back and they're like $20,000, some ridiculous number, whatever, they try.
If I'm telling you phase 1 is free, I'm sure phase 2 is not going to be expensive.
So you talked to the mayor about that, and
Yeah.
they were good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
And again, it's really up to the select board and the mayor to negotiate. And you could start that now.
Yeah. I just, I don't want to end up, it could potentially end up with a situation where we enter phase 1 with you and we try to negotiate, things go south. I don't want to create bad blood between the two towns.
No. And in that context, Northampton would be like, our money's still the same and we're ready to go.
Yeah.
If that was the case. But again, I don't, even using Kelly's math, it makes sense. It's the same,
Thank you.
Is it my understanding that you don't have to be a rec to take on another community?
Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, as Kelly explained, 911 can't tell you who you can go with or don't go with. I think with Southampton, we would work towards a rec with just Easthampton and Southampton. I'm not interested in becoming a Westcom. The chiefs that I talked to that got into that and some that didn't are not overly thrilled with the product.
Okay. Anybody else? Thoughts and questions?
Good.
All right. Well, I guess that's what we have for information.
Want to hear about my high school years?
No, I mean, you can feel free to sum it up or tell us what you'd...
But if you have any questions, by all means, you can reach out to me direct or the chief.
One more. Yeah, yep.
So you mentioned before that every station has like a fallback station.
Yep.
What is Southampton's fallback station now?
That's,
I'm sorry, I don't know.
who's your backup 911 now?
Westfield.
Westfield. Okay, go to Westfield. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Alberti, and thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, no, thanks to everybody for coming and listening. I think we've all learned a lot.
I think I just want to expound a little bit on one thing here. I think, as Chief Alberti said and Kelly's demonstrated, we need a safety net, right? And that safety net may be up to 6 months, right? And I say 6 months because I really think it's important for the town of Southampton. I think it's important for these feasibility studies for a rec center to, I'm speaking for myself here. I want to keep it local. I want to make sure that the stakeholders involved recognize the importance of that, maybe for lack of better terms, bedside manner, right? And I also want to make sure that, policy and procedure is, we have a say in that for the fire department as well. I think, I'm sure I can speak with the fire that they want, some say in their policies. However, that safety net goes out, and I just want to make sure that this is clear between, with Easthampton and Northampton, so they recognize this, and this is again coming from maybe not the board, but that rec, to have a regional emergency communication center is extremely important if the state recognizes its feasibility, because you never know what the cost will be if you have to replace your own 911 system, right? So those incentives are important. So I just think, speaking, about the phases, I think phase one, that safety net, let's get the safety net out there. Phase two, we really need to focus on the capabilities, but also the cost effectiveness of this, because it could get expensive. And what I mean by that is more of equipment and fees and so forth, because if the state stops providing incentives and funding for antiquated equipment, that's not really much, that's not going to be the case probably for a rec. That's the whole purpose of the rec. They want to make sure that it's a cost effective for the state as well. So I just, obviously, I have faith in both these communities, and I would encourage, if this is something that in the long term the communities want to accept Southampton, I would encourage applying for feasibility studies.
Okay. Well, it seems that we are at a crossroads in terms of where you are with your staffing issues, in terms of the long empty spot that you've had since March, April, thereabouts, and the likelihood of getting somebody in. And the emergency need to be able to staff our situation here in town and provide for residents. So I think we are at a real crossroads here to sit down and examine this situation. I guess I'm wondering, given the time frame you kind of laid out, it feels to me like we've got information that we still need for phase two. Not totally knowing about the rec or CGIS or the cost or
it would
whatever.
be the preference of the completion of phase two would be the state recognizing one or the other. And I don't believe it would be both. I think they're too close, so I don't think that's going to happen. That's just my personal feeling on this and experience. However, the feasibility study would be, if it takes 2 to 3 months, that transition would be most appropriate to knowing that one of these two communities could be a host community as a rec.
Right.
I just don't think we have the luxury to wait.
No, I agree.
No,
I agree.
but as far as this, that's why I'm trying to make the distinction between the two. The safety net is important,
Well, I guess that's kind of what I was sort of alluding to is that, I don't know that we have, in spite of all the information, I don't know that we have the information to bite off the entire plan.
Sure.
Right? But I'm wondering if we could take a look at phase one only for now and do some sort of decision-making to allow things to move forward. And Ed, yes, please.
I do have a recommendation for what it's worth.
Okay.
And it's going to involve actually both the short term and the long term, and I'm going to tie them together to actually start now.
Okay.
And just because there are some unanswered questions for CGIS, my recommendation would be to the select board would be to start the work to try to negotiate an MOU or a short-term MOU with Easthampton for the safety net in the short term. Because of the time frame, it might even involve something in that motion like allowing the town administrator and the chair of the select board to negotiate that, and giving the power to the select board chair to sign that MOU or short-term IMA for the safety net. But I would strongly recommend that you don't wait because of the feasibility time study, and as starting a concurrent path, actually start the process of asking both communities if they're willing to ask for the feasibility study for the long-term solution, and actually start the process of negotiating what an IMA is with both of those communities for a long-term solution.
Okay, interesting idea. Okay, any
I
thoughts?
kind of want to ask Northampton a question.
Yeah.
Now,
Go ahead.
how come you guys can't flip the switch tonight? You know, what's holding you
Our
back?
backup.
What's that?
Because, go ahead,
Oh,
sorry,
you
go
know the
ahead.
answer. Oh, okay.
Phase one, we can. Phase one, we could.
Oh, you
But
could.
the problem, like he was saying, is the problem is the unanswered question about CJIS. Phase two.
Yeah. So into phase two.
Right,
Okay.
we have the capabilities to answer the 911 phones, use the radios, phone the fire department, but the unanswered question is CJIS.
But I just want to make sure, Chief Fazoli, you don't, is there anything you wanted before? Because I have a sense emotions coming pretty quick.
No, I think the biggest thing with me is, our call volume has gone up. We're 80 calls ahead this year already. But with like Northampton, they'll do,
Chief, I'm sorry, would you mind coming up to the front? Sorry about that.
Northampton will do in a month what we do in a year for ambulance calls. And that's my only concern is, like you said, being lost in the shuffle. I mean, it probably wouldn't happen, but that's the biggest concern I have is just, being pushed to the side because Northampton is so busy that, we would get delayed calls.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right, any further questions? We have some thoughts from the town administrator. Would anybody?
I think I have a motion to make, but before I do that,
Yeah.
I think it's important for all our residents at home watching us live on YouTube tonight that, this may seem fast and sudden to everybody because the first public announcement was made Tuesday night during the select board meeting, if you participated in that. But it's not the first time that we're dealing with it, right? The chief, through the town administrator, brought this to us well over a month ago when we were trying different avenues. And really the trigger was this most recent full-time employee being offered a job, same job, different location at a pay scale that she just couldn't walk away from. And it's really getting us to this crossroad that now it seems like, from Tuesday to Thursday, we're about to make a decision to remove dispatching from the town of Southampton. And I can already hear the community forums saying we did this in a bat of an eye. But, so with that, I can take a stab at my motion?
Sure, okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
If I could just say, but what we're doing is responding to a real crisis, somewhat endemic in our community, that our pay scale is not enabling us to recruit the professional staff that we need.
Yeah.
This is a special circumstance, and I think we're taking a very responsible action, both being transparent with this meeting, to share with the public, short notice, but it is a real emergency to deal with phase one. So thank you for bringing us some viable options, because I think that it is our responsibility to make sure that Southampton remains safe and well-served, and I think we've got two good options for phase one.
Well, and that we live up to the expectations of the residents without a break in service, really, too, so, yeah.
Just to expand on that, again, I want to make it clear that, and this is often a misunderstanding of what emergency telecommunicators are. They are not clerical. They are your first emergency services that you get because they have specific training in emergency medical dispatch. Based on our current staffing, it takes us up to sometimes 4 months to train somebody. And the last two employees that we were training, unfortunately, they did not meet the standards that we needed. So for anybody, watching this presentation tonight, for me, it's very important that the more inexperience you have behind that phone means that you're going to get less of a service, if you will. They'll grow into it for sure, but it takes a while. and especially in a call center that does not have a lot of calls for service. We talked about our 911 calls here. It's been mentioned several times. So when you have experienced dispatchers, you're getting that first level of medical services in a way that I think is it's a better service. I'm not saying, no, don't get me wrong. I have a fantastic staff, dispatching staff. Unfortunately, I cannot maintain that staff. And as a result, ultimately, we will lose fantastic dispatchers, both part-time and full-time. And that will be a loss to Southampton, but we'll still maintain those services. And hopefully that those dispatchers will have other avenues that either the town can provide or the other dispatch centers. But I don't want, I just want the community to recognize that 911 operators are not clerical. They serve an essential function, and they save lives.
Right.
And so, to take 4 or 5 months, I feel for the town and for the dispatch center, I don't want to, I used this phrase before, I don't want to kick the can down the road and keep on chasing it. Because that's not responsible for me to keep on doing to try to maintain a dispatch center. It's what's responsible is to make sure that we get the most qualified personnel behind those 911 phone calls.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. John, you have...
Yep, so I have it's a lengthy motion, which I wrote out, so I'll give it to you afterwards, Ed, for the recorder. And it's based on a legal opinion by KP Law that they issued back during the pandemic. I move that the Southampton Select Board, under its authority under Mass General Law, Chapter 639 of the 1950 Civil Defense Act, declare a local state of emergency declaration to ensure continuation of 911 services as well as emergency dispatching services for the residents of Southampton. Further, that Chief Ian Illingsworth, in conjunction with the town administrator, take any and all action they deem necessary to ensure that continuous services remain in place for Southampton, including but not limited to expenditure of money in excess of appropriation not to exceed $50,000 per Mass General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 31D. This declaration to expire on September 26, 2023, if not lifted earlier and or extended by the Select Board. Lastly, that Southampton initiate Phase 1 with the City of Easthampton.
Second.
Wow. That's a lengthy motion. Is that understood by everybody? That's a lot of information there. I think tying in with what Ed had suggested was to...
So my intent there is we give clear direction on Phase 1.
Right.
Then we leave it to the town administrator and the police chief to determine what recommendation to come back on Phase 2, which would include negotiations, as the town administrator was indicating. We have several meetings in between, but they should continue to act under that order and not wait for our approval. The $50,000 is in recognition of the surplus money that was identified that wasn't appropriate but is available to be spent if need be, if we get so far as making enhancements in that to the building. And I believe we have 3 select board meetings in between that declaration.
We do at least, yeah. The other thing that Ed had suggested was to, just to amend your motion, was to allow the town administrator and then the select board chair to both negotiate and sign off on the MOU or whatever. I mean, given that our town
We could add that any MOU created,
Yeah.
the chair would be authorized to sign it, but, yep, it's fine with me.
That's it, is that?
I'll accept the amendment.
Okay. Let's have a second and then open for discussion.
Second.
All right, Joy, second. All right, thoughts and questions, discussion. Let's be sure we all understand the motion. Talking about Phase 1 only.
Yes.
And not to delay a Phase 2 conversation to be concurrently carried out with each community.
Correct. Phase 2 conversation would continue with each community going out and looking for the idea with state in terms of...
And the town administrator and the police chief would pick up the ball and run with that.
Right.
And if they came to an MOU, it would be brought before the chair of the select board
Right.
for approval.
I would assume, let me be sure if I'm right, under phase one, it would be an MOU probably, whereas on the longer phase would be the intermunicipality agreement, is that right? The IMA, Ed? Would that be the logical, MOU would be the first phase only, and then maybe an IMA for the second phase, or?
Well, the second phase definitely, and yeah, intermunicipal agreement for a permanent solution.
Okay.
But, and I will add that my own personal feelings is that whichever community we end up with a permanent solution, I also agree that we're better off doing that through a host agreement rather than trying to create a district.
Yeah, no, just joining in with another community, yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, any further questions, Steve?
But a host relationship that ripens to a wreck, not simply a host without the recognition and the extra economic incentives. I think I heard that as a distinction.
Yes, we do need a rec in the long run.
Okay.
For the longer term.
I do want to ask Northampton if you are still interested in going forward with a feasibility study for phase two.
Would you mind? Yeah.
Northampton absolutely is interested in still going forward with a feasibility study. I've offered my services already to assist in any transition if you guys do decide to go through Easthampton, just based on agency knowledge, or industry knowledge, excuse me. I don't know if the State 911 Department will do feasibility studies for both communities. I'm not really sure. That's something that is going to have to be asked to the state, so just keep that in mind, because there obviously is a cost associated if they're using a contracted service.
Okay, thank you.
Dan?
I had two questions. One, kind of asking Easthampton if they'd be okay with just taking on the phase one part for now.
Yes.
Okay.
No, my objective coming here tonight was to help our neighbors in phase one. That's my primary objective for tonight, and we can work on the rest down the road.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. And my second question is, we use the term kind of flip the switch. In our write-up, do we say, or do we address when that flip switch over would occur, or is that up to?
No, I didn't. The way I did it was.
Let them decide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we realize that it's, sooner the better, but some negotiations still have to happen and write up the MOU, right?
I was going to say, yes, the MOU will have to be signed no matter what before that switch is thrown.
Correct, yeah.
We'll also have to sign an MOU for the State 911 Department, having Easthampton receive our transfers.
Okay.
And it's got to be agreed by the state as well for that. Conversations with personnel at the State 911 Department, I don't think that's a significant issue. I don't think it is.
Okay. And they would provide us with the agreement?
I have the language already,
Okay.
the standard language that they emailed it to me.
Chief, question about Westfield is our backup center. We asked that earlier.
Yes.
Does any of this have an impact on them?
So Westfield, if the state agrees to the MOU where all calls get transferred to Easthampton, Westfield would no longer be our backup, Easthampton would be.
Okay.
And that's something where Easthampton would have to look at their logistics and see who was your backup? Hadley. That if there was any major event and there was multiple 911 calls, should Hadley maybe be transferred somewhere else? That's something that, that you'd have to work out through your own call services and so forth. But that is something that has to be considered as well.
Okay. All right, if no further discussion, I think we're ready to take a vote. Yeah.
So.
All right, all those in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Hearing none? Okay, the motion passes. So I think we'll go with Easthampton for the immediate safety net and get going on that and work on negotiating with both communities for the longer term. Okay?
All right.
Thank you both for showing up tonight. Much
Thank you
appreciated.
both. We appreciate it.
Much
Great
appreciated.
presentation, thank you.
Yeah.
Would a motion to adjourn be appropriate?
Yes, well, you have one tiny thing on the agenda, just one other business that can't wait. In your packets, I did give you a sample of a a draft letter to start the executive, or to reach out to a couple of companies, 3 companies in particular, that would carry out executive search for our new town administrator. So in your packet, you've each got a letter for different people, but there are 3 different organizations. If anybody has any comments about the letter, please reach out to me, and I'd like to get it out tomorrow. But my only question to you all is whether you think the date that I've asked them to respond to us, and I've asked basically for a proposal and a timeline and a cost proposal for providing executive search for recruiting a town administrator. I've asked that they respond to us by August 20th, and I don't know if that's too long, too short. Anybody have any feeling about that?
I mean, if it goes out tomorrow, August 18th is 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's a Friday. The 20th is a Sunday, so I wouldn't use that date.
Okay, so make it August 18th?
I would do the 18th, and are we scheduled to meet on the 22nd already?
We're 29th. We're meeting on August 1st, 15th, and 29th.
So that would be my only other addition to the letter, is if they do respond, to ask them to put a placeholder in for August 29th.
To perhaps come and talk to us?
Yeah,
Okay.
because if we can make a decision by the end of August, that's September, they can do their field work, advertise in the month of October, screening committees, potentially have a decision candidate in front of us by the end of November.
Okay,
Early Christmas present.
all right, we can add something into that.
Second round.
Whoa. Let's just try and get multiple candidates.
Yeah, right. And then we have
Ed's
one other...
not that easily replaceable.
We have one other meeting. Don't forget, we set up a meeting, last meeting, we set up we're going to be setting up a Zoom for August 4th at 2 o'clock to meet our 2 financial service providers. Okay? So that's a Zoom, okay? But the other 3 are in person, same old time, 6 o'clock. So if there's no other changes to the letter other than that date,
That's good. Do you need a motion, or are you all set?
sure, let's do a motion for the sake of a motion.
Oh, I was just asking a question. I was
Why
ready to
not?
make a motion.
Yeah.
I think we already did a motion to empower you to send that letter.
Yeah, you
Oh, yeah,
already
we did
have
actually
power.
allow me to do that. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to
Second.
adjourn. All right.
All in favor?
Aye. All right. We are adjourned at
Nobody leave, I've got handouts.
7:55.